Welcome, everyone. Good morning. And thank you all for joining us once again for another episode of Tom Mendoza Presents. As those of you who joined us for last fall's two outstanding conversations hosted by Tom know, it is always such a pleasure and exciting and so insightful to have Tom Mendoza with us in conversation with great industry leaders of our time. Each event in this series is available on our Mendoza College of Business YouTube channel. It is such a privilege for us to listen to and participate in these conversations. Today, we are delighted that we will be featuring the conversation with Tom and Guy Chiarello, who Tom will introduce. Tom is well known to so many of you, so I will be brief. He was a former vice chairman and president of NetApp, which he helped build into a Fortune 500 company. Today, Tom sits on the board of directors of UiPath, Varonis, and Vast. Here at Notre Dame and at the college which bears his name, we are so grateful for his friendship and support and to have him with us in this series. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Guy, for joining us today.
Thank you, Martin. So let me do a proper introduction to Guy Chiarello. So Guy started his career as a technical analyst at Morgan Stanley in 1987. In 10 years, he rose up to managing director, which is extraordinary in a bank. 6 years later, he took on one of the most powerful positions on Wall Street, most influential positions as CIO, Chief Information Officer of Morgan Stanley, which is where we met. He did a spectacular job of building a team there, such that most of those people have gone on to tremendous things all over Wall Street. But at the time, what Guy was very well known for was building an amazing team and then being extraordinarily good at bringing new products to market faster than his competitors. Jamie Dimon didn't miss that. He brought Guy over to CIO, global CIO at JP Morgan Chase in 2007. Guy was there for 6 years, which time you can imagine 2007, 2008 was the meltdown. So you can imagine he walked into some amazing things. They were doing major acquisitions. It was an incredible, difficult situation, but legendary performance of making them stronger coming out of it. 2013, he made what a lot of people thought was an odd decision. We'll talk about it. And he left what literally was the most significant CIO job in the world. And he became the president of a struggling company called First Data. We'll talk a little bit about that. But so he went and took a president's job to turn this company around. 2 years later, they had the largest IPO in the world for 2015. And 4 years later, they were bought for $22 billion by Fiserv, which Guy is on the executive staff that runs that company today. So if that was his whole story, that would be an unbelievable story. But the bigger story with Guy is he's always given back to people that he's mentored, people he's helped, in many, many organizations. He was recognized as Man of the Year for Make-A-Wish. He was recognized for helping out for numerous cancer organizations, lymphoma and leukemia organization, Man of the Year. Brian Kelly's organization with Packy Kelly for Kelly Cares. He's helped run that in New York for a number of huge meetings. And one we'll talk about later called A Chance in Life because it's a special story. Guy, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Tom, it's a pleasure to be with you and the team at Notre Dame. Thank you, Dean. And, I think before we get started, some people probably don't know that you and I have a personal relationship for a long time, but when it comes to the professional part of the relationship, my respect for you is really outsized. I think what you've done to give back not only to the Notre Dame community, but what you've done to give back to the business community is really special. I'm proud of you. And I want to thank you for all that we've been able to do together.
Guys, thank you very much. So growing up in Trenton, did your parents think my son Guy is going to be a big time tech guy on Wall Street? Is that what they were thinking, Guy?
I would have thought that was the furthest thing from their mind. They probably thought not only was it impossible, but they could have never charted that path.
Let's talk about your parents. What did they do?
They're amazing. Probably first and second generation immigrants from their parents and grandparents from Italy. My father worked for a building company for 35, 40 years, incredibly loyal to the company and just a great guy, amazing work ethic. My mom was a partner in a business with her brother which eventually became named Chiarello's. It's a food and catering business, but she really, I mean, her work ethic, she was sitting behind that counter. She passed in June of 2020, unfortunately, of COVID. But she, up until 3-4 months before that, was sitting, and working in that deli at 88 years old and talking to customers and really client focused. And she, she really set the tone for not only me, but for our family. And, I probably won't tell you something you don't know. And I became friends with Michael Dell after many years of business. And he and I, when we talk, the first thing we talk about is what's it like to have your name on the business? Now, my mother, this business is 60 years. Imagine being successful for 60 years in a small, medium-sized business, and your name is on it. You talk about pride, you talk about family. Like if you're part of an Italian family and your name is on it, you wake up every day and quality and respect are the most important things in your life. So that's been drilled into me since day one.
That's very interesting since I know how the story ended. It had a big influence. So what brought you to Wall Street? What made you think I want to go that direction with your career?
I had no idea. None of my brothers or sister had been able to graduate from college. I was the only one with a bachelor's degree or undergraduate degree in the family. Actually, before I went to Morgan Stanley, I spent 2 years with the state of New Jersey Department of Treasury. And it's because when I was in school, I tried to find somebody who would teach me how to write software. I knew that technology was going to change the world. This is 1983, 84. I knew technology was the enabler for the way things would be for the next, 20, 30, 50 years. I couldn't even think that far back then. And I wanted to be in the middle of it. So I found somebody who would teach me how to write software. And I did that for a year or two. And then that was that was when I started to mature, I think, as a professional and thinker, because I went on an interview in New York City with Morgan Stanley. It was for a consulting position for a piece of an area of software that I had become an expert in. And 2 hours after it was done, it's the first time I had actually been in New York City in a big building. 2 hours later, they offered me the job. I went home. My wife was pregnant. And I said, I'm going to leave the state of New Jersey and take this job at Morgan Stanley. She said, that's fabulous. How long is the contract? I said, 30 days. She said, I'm pregnant. You're leaving your job for a 30-day contract. What happens after 30 days? I said, I have no idea. She said, what are we going to do? I said, don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about it. It'll be fine. And that was the first big decision I made. So I didn't know I was going to end up there, Tom.
Yeah.
But I knew that, my whole life, I had a lot, I was an athlete, played baseball. I was very good at it. It was the way I got to college and got college paid for. But I always had confidence in myself and never worried too much about failure. I knew it would come often, but I didn't worry about it. And that was my first big decision.
Those are great lessons, by the way. A lot of people worry about stuff that never happens, right? That's their life. Right. They worry about things that never happen. So I mentioned that you rose up to be a managing director in 9 years, then to this incredible position of CIO and built great teams. What do you think were the 3 or 4 things that you did right that allowed you to have that kind of success at Morgan Stanley and basically later too? But.
Yeah, let me tell you, maybe there's a few things I could hit on this one. First of all, like you asked me once, how does somebody whose family, and to be fair, is very poor, not knowledgeable in the business industry, like how do you get from there to here? And this is important because it'll be a thread that goes through our conversation. First, and I'm a big AI guy. Like I believe in studying. Even when I was playing baseball, Moneyball was the time of Moneyball. Statistics mattered, and really studying the trends were important. I'm a firm believer. It does not matter where you start. And again, this is the AI thing. I think what learnings will teach us over time is the qualities that people have and exhibit, and the self-esteem and confidence they have, and the teamwork and ethic that goes with it. So I really think for anybody listening here, whether you're at school at this point, getting ready to go or have left, forget where you started. It doesn't really matter. It might matter in your first 5 years in business, but it doesn't really matter where you started. It matters what you do with what you have. All of us have the same plumbing. We got the same plumbing. So what are you going to do with what you have? And then I think, that goes to your question, even even at Morgan Stanley, I wasn't supposed to make it there, right? My analyst class there was Harvard, Yale, probably Notre Dame, Stanford. I wasn't, I used to get teased by, some of the people who were alongside me saying, you went to the college in New Jersey, we're going to eat you up. I used to just sit there and smile and say, game on. And, and really, I learned how to do every job that I possibly could in that company for, I don't know, the 20 years I was there, but certainly for the first 10 years, just learned everything and became a sponge. And as you know, most people learn through listening, not through talking. So I just learned and did every job. And for me, those were some of the most important lessons. It's really hard to be an expert unless you do the work yourself. And it's really hard to lead experts unless you can understand, the challenges that they face. So, so for me, it was being humble early. It was a work ethic that no one was going to outwork me. It didn't matter what I did, whether it was on the field or in the office. No one was going to outwork me. I think the other thing is I never did anything for money. Never. I did it because I loved it. I did it because it had impact, or I did it because it was right for my family. And then, I think I made really smart decisions and had a bunch of luck. You do have to be smart and lucky. There's a lot of people who probably, might have been in my same scenario, didn't catch a few breaks along the way and didn't quite get all the way there. So you need a little bit of luck, but those are some key things that come to mind.
Now, I mentioned that you built a great team, and you did. I mean, you gave me the honor of coming in every 6 months for a number of years there and talking to about what I thought about the industry. And I mean, the quality of that team and the trust they had in each other. There was a longevity, a trust, and an execution model that was unbelievable. Everybody admired it. So as someone who's renowned for building great teams, what do you think some of the things you did right about hiring and motivating those people to get it to work as well as it did?
Yeah, you hit the key theme. I mean, we were talking for a few minutes before this, as Tom and I always do. And I was joking that in the new house I'm in now, I put a Notre Dame room in, and down there's a picture, and it's Tom and I tapping the sign, play like a champion, as we were going onto the field with the team. And I told him in my house, I have a saying that says, play with champions. And as Tom gets back to this key point that he just highlighted, I realized very early on that wanting to be the smartest person in the room is a sign of insecurity. And in many respects, insecurity in business is not a winning attribute. And being secure and surrounding yourself with the best possible talent is critical. I had a NASCAR team in the other day. It was a pit crew. They had a great saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And if you know car racing and pit crews, like, you have to be an absolute perfect harmony. That team at Morgan Stanley, all I thought about is the best group of people with different attributes together, creating a winning combination, building the trust that is required so that they could do their job uninhibited and with full, quote, security, and just over time challenging them. My entire career, every time I've made a move in my career, I plot this. Like, I'm back to like the Moneyball and the analytics type of personality, but I'm not an actuary. Like, I don't mean it that way. I just mean plotting the trends. Every point in my career that I felt my learning curve flattened, I made a move. That was the single determinant. Didn't matter. Morgan Stanley I was at for 20 years. I learned for 20 years before that curve flattened. So I think, those things are, you got to put talent around you. The first question I ask when I walk into a room around a problem, I ask probably either the youngest from an experience point of view person in the room first, what would you do in this situation? What's your best idea? Give me some ideas on how you would tackle this problem. My boss, what I ask of my boss is, I usually know how to make the decisions on my own. What I ask a boss to do is take me from this range of solutions to this range of solutions, widen my sphere of thinking, because I'm in the middle of it and maybe I'm not thinking wide enough. And then the third thing I do is, as soon as I reach a decision that I'm firm on, I go look for somebody to try to talk me out of it. I want to know why I might be wrong, to be sure that I have a conviction that I'm right. So those are just, I call them Guyisms. Like a lot of people you would talk to would say, this is what Guy does, and I love it. It's a formula that works for me. And
I just learned some things I'm going to use right away. I thought that was great. So now you go to JP Morgan, 2007, most dynamic bank in the world at the time, for sure. Jamie was doing all kinds of big acquisitions. You were fundamental to making them work. And then the crisis hits 2008. What lessons do you learn having to manage it in a new company, dynamic company, under stress, in a crisis? What are some of the things you came away from that with?
Yeah, look here. I think the first decision was the most important one, which was my learning curve flattened at Morgan Stanley. I was there for 24 years. It was a great career. I love the company. I still love it today. I hired an agent in business, and I said, go get me 3 interviews in the next 2 weeks. One with Jamie Dimon, one with Dick Fuld, who was the CEO of Lehman Brothers, and one with Vikram Pandit, who I had worked with at Morgan Stanley, who was the CEO of Citibank. I basically, for the most part, interviewed with all 3 of those in the next 2 weeks, or at least people, that were very close to them. And that's how I met Frank Bisignano at JP Morgan. All 3 of them offered me a job. I took the job where the compensation was 40% less than the other 2. So I went to work for JP Morgan for less money than Citibank or Lehman Brothers would have paid me. And I still talk to Dick Fuld regularly. I talk to him every couple of weeks, and I joke with him about it often. But I did it because, to me, I felt that Jamie and Frank at the time were not only 2 of the best people in financial services and business, but people who I thought I could learn from every day of the week. And I knew in my mind at the time that JP Morgan would be premier in the world in financial institutions. And then 5 minutes after I got there, Lehman Brothers, kind of had their situation, and the financial crisis hit. We had to buy out banks like Washington Mutual and convert them. And it was really just a crazy environment. Digital was just taking off. Mobile, when I got to JP Morgan, there wasn't a single mobile user. In less than 18 months, we probably built the entire mobile banking program for millions of customers in a very short period of time. So it was exhilarating. I mean, it really was. It was the best job in the world for me at the time, and I feel like it was great for them to have me, and learned a lot. And I still think it's one of the greatest companies in the world today. But you'll ask me the next question, I'm sure, about why I'm still not there today. But that was how I felt from 2007 to 2013, and wouldn't trade it for
the answer though. I'm guessing the learning curve had a part of it.
Curve flattened.
But you took a job with First Data. Digital was still very new as a digital payments, and the company was struggling. And you came in to be the president. Tell me about that.
It was worse than that, Tom. I think, the company had great clients, but I should be careful what I say, but it almost felt like it was nearly bankrupt. KKR had taken it private. They were at the time, they had tried to make a go of it. We're looking to sell off the parts, the company that weren't profitable. And back to the JP Morgan, this goes back to having, an incredible family and wife, because this was another one of those scenarios, Tom, where I came home and I said to Denise, I'm 6 months away from full career at JP Morgan, which means the rule of 60. That means I could have years of service and age. I could have retired. And in Wall Street, you typically get paid, but you have a 3-year tail of your bonus vesting. So, and then on top of that, I had some other, special equity. In 6 months, I would have fully vested, could have put my feet up on the desk, worked for the best company in the world, and, had a great financial outcome. 6 months, and I left. I took it all of that equity, all of that value that I had earned for the last 6 or 7 years, and rolled it into First Data. At the time, looked like it was potentially worthless paper in a company that wasn't going to make it. And I had people everywhere saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "I know exactly what I'm doing. My learning curve has flattened out. I have unbelievable confidence in myself, and at that time in Frank, who had moved over to the company. And I really have to show myself that I'm as good as I think I might be by turning around a company that's in huge distress, where the impact that I would have every single day on that business was either positive or negative. Because JP Morgan was a great company before and after I left, and Morgan Stanley was a great company before and after I left. But this one was about, a handful of us turning around the impossible situation. And you talked about some of the outcomes. We raised $3.5 billion in private equity 12 months after we got there on our reputations. One of the largest IPOs of a very, very long time, and the largest in 15. In fact, we had 2 days on the New York Stock Exchange because there were a couple of companies who backed out at the last. It was a blizzard. We decided to go public in a blizzard, meaning not weather. I'm talking about like a financial blizzard. And then, Fiserv and First Data had some conversations together, and we thought together, back to again, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go together. We decided that going together would be a great outcome. And what a great story. My wife still looks at me from time to time and said, "I can't tell if you're crazy or you're smart, but that's okay. Keep doing what you're doing." And
it's working out. Keep doing it.
It's working out. It's working out.
One of the things, I was reading a thing the other day. Well, let's talk about the pandemic, first of all. I'm interested in the last year and a half has changed, or last year has changed how people think of work, think of business. How did that affect Fiserv over the last year? What are you doing differently, thinking differently about going forward than you would have without this?
It's a good question. I think for the people listening, first and foremost, I lost my mother to COVID. I had COVID in November. I just finished my second vaccination last night, so I'm a little bit, I got a little bit of wooziness going on myself at the moment. But I say that only because in these next set of comments, I don't want you to think that in any way I minimize this pandemic situation. It has struck my family and affected my family in a variety of ways. On the professional side of it, I always say don't waste a crisis. And in a crisis, regardless of whether it's personal, professional, or nature, there's always a series of learnings, and there's always a way to innovate or transform or rebuild coming out of it. And I think that this pandemic has challenged us all to think about our lives. I went to New York City for 35 straight years, every day of my life that I didn't travel. I traveled the world on a regular basis, and for 340 days, I've been home working. That's a shock to the system. Now, on the positive side, what I like about it, especially in the industry I'm in, and the reason I went to First Data in that sector is because I felt like payments was the fastest moving sector in the marketplace. I figured it would transform not only itself in the world, and I figured worst case, if I didn't make it, I still had a skill that everybody would want for the next 10 years. But the digital revolution arrived, and I have been hoping that digital could, and all the things that go with it, would be something that I could really help drive at this part of my career. And I got a lot of help from the pandemic. Digital is the way people act and operate now. Digital is the way people think. All the things that people want to save time, have convenience, enjoy unique experiences are all coming faster than we ever expected, largely because the pandemic has forced us to all think and operate in a different way. The way we work, will people ever return to skyscrapers again in highly dense facilities? Will people go on trains to commute to work on an everyday basis? Will the medical system continue to force people to show up at an office to see a doctor? Will things happen in different ways? I could get care a lot faster this way than I can, other ways. So I am remember my first set of statements. I do want to be careful, but on the professional side, I'm exhilarated by the things that have come from this pandemic, because even in our own company, we're rethinking about how we build out our office space. We're rethinking about how we measure employees' productivity. We're rethinking about how we innovate. Innovating this way is a very complicated thing. Operating this way isn't that hard, but innovating is. So rethinking about how we innovate, and then how we build, new spaces and things, along those lines. Most of the real estate that we have, if it were my decision, we'd send it all back and rethink the whole thing. I can't talk too much about what Fiserv is doing, but that's kind of the mindset. Rethink possible, rethink next, and it's exhilarating. I mean, this is the experience, like, at my level, that I want to give back to our community.
I asked Carl Isham about the same question, and he said it's an accelerant. It didn't change something that wouldn't have happened, but it's been an accelerant that's off the charts. Right?
Carl's a great guy too.
He's a great guy. I know you guys are good friends. I'm going to switch gears here, and then we're going to have Natalie jump in with some Q&A from the audience. But first of all, I want to say the advice you just gave is absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to rewatch this a number of times. So a couple of years ago, I'm walking in the park with my dog, and my phone rings on a Saturday, and it's Guy. He says, "When you go to Rome, where do you stay?" I tell him a couple of options that I use, and then he goes, I say, "Why are you going to Rome?" He says, "Well, I'm going to go see the Pope." There are not too many people who could say that where you wouldn't go, "Give me a break. You're not seeing the Pope." I knew for a fact he was seeing the Pope. And I said, "Why are you seeing the Pope?" And Guy is also in the Italian Hall of Fame. He was the, what do you call it, Grand Marshal of the Columbus Day Parade. So, I mean, he's done so much for charities. As I mentioned, the Pope wanted to thank him. Now, fast forward 2 years, and my wife threw me a party after I retired from NetApp, and I had like 60 friends from around the world that came, and Guy could not make it. And he's going back and forth. I said, "No, it's okay. No, I'm trying to move this, trying to move that," but he couldn't make it. And so I got one of the best text messages you can imagine in your life. He goes, "Tom, I feel so bad about this. I want to make it up to you. And I have a meeting with this was November 15th. I have a meeting with the Pope on December 9th. I'd like you and Ty to come with me." Now, my son's birthday is the 8th. I go, "Ty, Jake's birthday." She goes, "Don't worry about it. We're going." What, are you kidding me? I'm like, "Oh, yeah, sorry." So anyway, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, and oh, by the way, my wife was pregnant with we now have a daughter, Mia, but the Pope, thanks to Guy, blessed the baby in her stomach, which I've shown some people a video of. But talk a little bit about how that you felt meeting the Pope twice, and the work you did, and then A Chance in Life, which is a wonderful charity that you brought a lot to, and I had the opportunity experience with myself. So talk a little bit about it from your perspective.
Yeah, here's kind of the background on this one. I'm sure all of us have suffered some strife or tragedy in their life. For me, my youngest brother, I forget his exact age at the time, I want to say 35, 37, was stricken with lymphoma. And, imagine, your younger brother in that situation, and it was still early days in that disease. And I remember finding the best doctors in the country for him. And when it came to the treatment, we found this, one doctor, Dr. Strayer. And to make a long story short, Dr. Strayer saved his life. And I said, "Doc, I'll take care of you for the rest of your life. You tell me whatever you need. You need research money, I'll get it. You need, great staff, I'll help you find it. You need anything from me, you pick up the phone." And for 10 straight years, I probably, with a group of great people, raised a lot of money for Robert Wood Johnson and LLS. I'm on the board of a different hospital now, Calcutta Health Systems. But what that taught me, Tom, was giving back was one of the most important things that you could do in life. And whether it's giving back experience, whether it's giving back knowledge, whether it's giving back, financially, it was important. I'm involved in a number of different charities, but A Chance in Life came around And it struck me because I do a lot of things for children and kids education of distressed children, as well as cancer. And Chance in Life was interesting because it basically took kids who didn't have a chance in life, really didn't. They were so disadvantaged that they were going to end up on the wrong side of the law, there's no doubt. And they built these towns. They started in Italy and then started to build them around the world. And they built these towns and they let the kids self-govern those towns. So they educated them and they allowed them to self-govern them. And, I ran into Gabriella Delmonico and, he talked to me about it. And I put together an amazing gala in New York City at an amazing place at Cipriano's down in Wall Street. And we raised a lot of money. And then a year later, we did more and did more. Little did I know that this was one of the Pope's personal charities. And I get, the next thing I know, his right-hand cardinal shows up to the gala. And, I treat him the way I would treat you or anybody else on this call, sits next to me, takes very good care, say, whatever you need, Cardinal, I'm there to help you. One thing leads to another. Before I know it, a couple of weeks later, I get a phone call and says, our Pope would like to see you, and you can bring a few friends. I don't know what a few friends meant, but like in Italian, it means as many as you can call. But I called a few friends, and Tom was at the top of that list. He was at the top of that list. And I said, I want to bring you to a once-in-a-lifetime experience that you will never forget. And I hope it leaves an indelible mark on your soul, because you'll realize that what we do every day means nothing. And when you walk into history and you walk into these chambers, you will feel something that you've never felt before. And I got to address the Pope in a speech. He spoke back to me. It was an unbelievable, touching moment for me when I saw Tom's wife, and the Pope touching her stomach and watching it back in the video and say, God bless you. And I will pray for your baby. I think Ty said me at the time, and it was just a unique experience. And it comes back to being lucky and smart. In this case, being lucky and good-hearted. I had no idea that chance in life would lead to that. It's not something I strive for. It was giving back, and I think that's it's really what we're supposed to do. When you get to my level of both age, success, and experience, our job is to give back to our families and set the next generation up, and it's to give back to people who need it, because you can't take it with you. And you're smart enough to know where the places are that can make the best use of it.
One thing I have to say about you, Guy, and other people that come to mind that are friends of both of ours, what you do, which I appreciate so much, is you always give without an ask. You always give, not because something's coming back to you. You give because it's the right thing to do. And that is my best friends. That defines a characteristic of them all, actually. I appreciate that so much. That's the kind of people I want around me.
Thank you for that. I probably put hundreds of kids into internships who never would have had a chance. Like watching them grow, it's great. Yeah. My own family, I'll tell people the most important thing you can do, work-life balance is important. If you don't let anybody outwork you, you could ruin a whole lot of things to the right of that. You really have to figure out that balance. That's probably been the most difficult thing for me in my life. I also think I've been able to do that well. 37 years later, 3 children later, 6 grandchildren later, I feel like I got that part right, thank God, because otherwise, it would be a one-sided story.
All right, Natalie, I know the audience has questions, and I just want to say, Guy, thank you so much for sharing all that knowledge. That was awesome. So let's hear what the audience would like to talk about.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. And as Tom said, Guy, this has been phenomenal. This is just as you described your trip to Italy to see the Pope as a once-in-a-lifetime experience that you'll never forget. For us, this conversation is a once-in-a-lifetime event that I know everyone on the call, especially our students, will never forget. So we've got a number of questions. The first being that you've shared extraordinary leadership and motivation tips and skills with all of us. How do you inculcate those skills enterprise-wide? How do you create a culture where other people are as dedicated to building those skills as you are?
it's team of teams is the way I think about it. In that, I can touch so many people directly, and then I can touch a broader set indirectly. But I really, the people that work for me, boy, the one thing they better get right is treating people the right way, advancing people in their careers. Again, back to the people that work for me know I would run through the wall for them, as long as they continue to produce the way they're supposed to produce professionally and personally. And when you can get that feeling, when somebody knows that, they'll do anything to help not only me, but the team succeed. So the most important thing is really cultural. There are a lot of good software engineers in the world. There are a lot of good minds in the world. There are a lot of, other capable aspects, hard workers in the world. But what you first have to do is pick the right group of people, who then can pick the right group of people, who then can pick the right group of people. Then you have to teach them their morals and their ethics, both business-wise and personally. And then you just have to drill it every day. The guy who was I remember this very well, and he was the CEO of LinkedIn, Jeff Weiner. He said to me one day when I had him come in to speak to a group at JP Morgan, he said, the point at which you're ready to puke from saying the same thing over and over and over again is the point at which someone just started to absorb and digest what you told them. So, the idea, and if you have children, you'll figure this out really quickly. Like if you say something once, it's not going to stick. And over, that drive and that consistency and that discipline, and then creating the mental imagery for people that go with it. It's one of the things that I think about when you ask that question.
I would add to it that people emulate the behavior that you recognize. So as you if you want people to be selfless and, do an act where it doesn't benefit them, but they did it because it's right for the team and it helps the company, you talk about that. If you just hold up somebody's performance and everyone around them knows that that person is doing it in a way that they're not proud of. When we started NetApp, we said, what's our goal? And we had an offsite. It was me, Dan Wormhove, and James Lau and Dave Hitz, the founders. We said, we want to build a company we're proud of the rest of our lives. We were voted the #1 company to work for, just side topic, 2009. The first call I got was from Guy. I just landed from Japan, and it texted. He said, not at all surprised. If you're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and that it goes back to who you hire, who you put as leaders, if you have the right leaders. But if you want to build a culture you're proud of every day of your life, then you should promote to that. You should hire to it. You should promote to it. You should evaluate your leaders on it. Are they doing things that I'm proud of and I want them on my team? Play with champions, right, Guy? And that, but he's always built a great culture. And I think one of the reasons we're such good friends, professionally and personally, is we align on these things. It really is about your people.
I agree.
Wonderful. We've talked a lot about how exemplary you are, Guy, as a leader, and Tom, we know that of you as well, and about your successes. But you also mentioned failure, not worrying about failure, knowing it would come occasionally, but not worrying about it. Can you talk about a time, and Tom, we'd love to hear about your experience as well, when you felt like you failed and how you moved forward from that and how you moved your team forward from that?
Yeah, I don't feel like I've had any tragic failures, thank God, and that's a positive. Having said that, I can think of so many times that I was afraid, and maybe that's a better way to phrase my answer, Natalie, because it's a very good question. I think about it a lot, and I have a very good friend who's actually, I spent time with Notre Dame and the football team, Joe Plumeri, who wrote a book that was called The Power of Being Yourself. And I remember coming out to Notre Dame. He was going to speak to the team, and I said, Joe, what are you going to talk about? And he said, I'm not sure yet, but I'm going to figure it out between tonight and tomorrow. But there's going to be something basic that everybody will remember. Well, I've remembered it since that plane ride and since that day, which is I'm going to tell them to turn the question mark into the exclamation point. And I'm going to put some packaging around that. So when I go back to your question, for the last, it's got to be at least 7, 8 years now, when I think about failure, failure to me is fear. And in business, I have no fear. That's how I feel today. When I hear that saying, I have concerns, I have temporary fear, but I'm not afraid of the dark. Because there's no reason to be afraid of the boogeyman, because you don't know that it's not real. It is true that there's times of darkness and times of fogginess, but what I try to live by in most of the scenarios I get into is, how do you turn that question mark into the exclamation point? I was afraid to go to First Data. I'm not lying. Leaving the best perch in the country to something that was, not only was I worried I couldn't turn it around, but what would people think? Would I be a failure? Would everything that I did for the previous 30 years be forgotten? I was afraid of failure, not in the business sense, in the personal sense, and that self-esteem and pride that goes with it. So, I think I could list out 20 different things, but most of the times I have failed, it has been because I didn't have the confidence that I was going to turn the question mark into the exclamation point. And at some point in your career, for things you can control, health and things like that, you can't, but things that you have a lot more control over, I really do wake up every day and say, there's not a problem I can't solve, because I know how to get the right people around the problem. I understand how to get the assets, financially that are required. I'm rational enough to not get, lost in the wrong path. So it's really, failure to me is lack of confidence and lack of self-esteem. And if you can conquer that, I really feel positive. Tom, what are your thoughts?
Early in my career, I was 26, and a gentleman named Frank Keeney, he ended up being the first head of sales at EMC at one of our competitors. And he said to me, we were at a company called Data General, and he said to me, I'll bet people tell you make great decisions all the time. And I'm like, glad you noticed. He says, some guy called you from a bar, told you to interview at a company in New York. If you get the job, fly to El Paso, Texas, come to work for him. That actually happened. He was talking to my brother in a bar. That's how I got in tech. You want to get in tech, get your brother to go to a bar in El Paso. So I show up in El Paso. I sell for 2 years, the smaller stuff. And to make money, you got to sell the big stuff. So I walked into my boss. I want to sell the big stuff. He said, nah, you got to be 40 years old. So I quit. He goes, you have another job? No, I just don't want this job. I moved to Phoenix. I found out you could sell copiers. I made twice as much money, 6 months. I call on a guy, he's a search guy. He's like, why aren't you back in tech? I can't make any money. Yeah, sure you can. That's how I got the Data General. He goes, now, all of those are awful decisions. But what you do right is you make them work. Once you make a decision, you don't look left or right. You go make them work. And that was a great lesson for me. I tried to be better at decision making, but too many people don't make decisions. That's why they fail. What they do is they kind of make a decision. Lou Holt spoke at my sales kickoff, said the one failure that he regrets of his life was the New York Jets. He was there, I think, 8 games and quit. And he said, I had said to my wife, I want to give it a try. I don't give anything a try. Guy Chiarello does not give anything a try. If I'm in, I'm in. So the crisis we faced at NetApp when this .com bubble burst, I mean, our stock was one of the highest flying stocks on the stock exchange. It split 4-for-1 2 times, 4-for-1, 2-for-1 4 times, excuse me. But it was a 156, it went to 6. Our business, 70% was tech or internet. And people around us were saying, you're dead. You are dead. But none of us felt that way. I was thinking that when you were saying this, Guy, because I look around with Dave and James, nobody left the company. They all said, what can we do to bring this back? So having a team that you're inspired by and you are so committed to, and people would say we failed for a period there because our business got disrupted and savaged, but we didn't feel like failures. We felt like I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're coming out of this. And we ended up coming out of it. The last thing I would say is the one thing when I'm asked this question that I've thought of before is like when I first got in leadership, I really thought I was good for the first 2 years. And I met a couple of those guys years later and they told me, you were not good. And looking back, I would have handled things very differently. It all worked out, by the way. External people said you were great because the numbers, but I wasn't, I was too abrupt. I wasn't explaining myself enough. I wasn't listening enough to it. Guy said, I just was so sure of myself, like every 26-year-old, that I did handle things very, very different later. But you got to go through these kind of steps to grow. I didn't offend anybody. I didn't do it on purpose. I wasn't mean. I just wasn't that competent yet. So failure is an interesting word. I think I commented before about people who fear it. My dad was always worrying about what could go wrong. And, we didn't have any money, so I understand he had to more. But he said to me one day when I was at Notre Dame, why don't you worry about it? I said, you know what? 90% of the things that you're worried about are never going to happen. Let's wait till the 10% happen and deal with them. And that's part of the confidence Guy's talking about. So
Natalie, just, I know we'll get to the next question, but I looked at my text message from this morning here as Tom was talking, because it reminded me of something. And here's certainly what I would say to the student body if you were working for me in business. And this goes back to why I don't worry so much about failure. I kind of worry more about success. Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs quote, I use it a lot. All I ask is that today you do the best work of your entire life. All I ask is that today you do the best work of your entire life. And I think if you live by that, you tend to not, that's basically a statement of worrying about succeeding rather than worrying about failing. Because if you do your best, then, fate will take it from there.
That's it. And I think going back to leadership is getting everybody, you got to earn the right to ask. You got to do so much at the point of attack that when you ask, they don't want to let you down. And once you've done that and you have the right team, no matter what the challenge is, you feel like you can go get it. I mean, so the work goes into, do I have the right people? Is everybody aligned? Is everybody, I used to tell people, if you think there's a better place for you and your family, you should go there. Like now, this moment. Don't worry about offending me, because all I ask of everybody is I'm not gonna wake up every day trying to convince you it's a good idea to be here. You have to bring that. If this is the most important thing in your life professionally every day, we're gonna get along fine.
Absolutely. Well, those are fantastic answers. And I think that's a great transition to another question we have, which is, you're both so extraordinary in your confidence. And it sounds like that's really been part of the key to, as you said, Tom, making a difficult situation work or a difficult decision work. How would you say people can build their confidence to succeed as leaders?
I would say I'll do it real quick.
Yeah.
I do a lot of public speaking. People say, are you nervous? And the answer is no. And because I'm prepared. If you're not prepared, you're nervous. You ever go to a meeting and you're not quite prepared for that meeting? You should be nervous. You didn't prepare. So to me, you should constantly work on your skill set. Guy said something critical before, which is when he first started, I was on a panel at Notre Dame on entrepreneurship, and it was all VCs and the founders of NetApp. And everybody was saying you should get in a startup right out of college. You should get in a startup. And then they said, what do you think? And I said, well, I didn't do that. And I'm happy I didn't do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But I spent 7 years learning. I learned that I could sell. I learned about selling to enterprises. I learned about leading. Before I took my first startup job, I had been in business 7 years. And I know that if I had taken it right out of college, I wouldn't have been that guy. So to me, Guy said it before, he took jobs for less money. He was always learning and honing that skill. And if you take life like that, I mean, you're getting a paid MBA when you get out of Notre Dame. Your first jobs are a paid MBA, and learn. It's not about getting a title or how much you make right away. It's, am I learning? Am I growing? And second thing, I'll just leave on this. Find people who will mentor you that are the right mentors for that time. Jay Shree and I had that talk. Mentors can change by where you are in your life. Guy was saying, talk to somebody 20 times and then they get it. When I give talks, somebody will come to me and say, I've heard you say that 10 times today, it'd be different. It's because where they are as a receiver. So to me, it's if as long as you're constantly growing and taking on new chances and taking on new responsibility, it could be within one company or multiple companies, learn and be around people. And Guy said he left companies every time he flattened out on that. I left if I didn't feel it was a challenge anymore, or I didn't believe in the direction of the company. I wanted to go do something different. It was never about money. Same as Guy. I never once took a job for money. Money happened because I was in the right place at the right time with the right people.
I can't say it any better, Natalie. He's got it. He got it. 100 out of 100.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, we've got time for one final question. Let's say you're in a room with an executive that you'd like to make an impression on, either as a mentor or for another reason. You've got 20 seconds with them, 20 minutes with them. How do you make an impression?
Ask 20 questions. Ask 20 questions. I tell you what, my interviews.
100% right. I agree.
My interviews with people have very little to, after you get past the compulsories, the first few minutes to really get you make sure you understand the background, you're in the right direction. I'm really looking for individuals who have intellectual curiosity, who have the confidence. This is back to confidence. Someone who's willing to ask questions has a lot of confidence. It also means, to Tom's point, they prepared. They know something, they know something about the executive. I don't mean to turn this all into interviews, but whether you were with me in an elevator, or whether you're with me on a plane, or whether you're with me in a meeting, or whether you're with me in an interview, it's really the same thing. I get exhilarated by people who have, ideas, who are creative, who are go-getters, not for self-preservation or for, really only personal gain, but they're really genuinely trying to immerse themselves into a conversation or a problem and be inquisitive about it and helpful. And that is why I call on people very frequently and say, what's your idea? What's your best idea today? What do you think about this issue? So for me, hands down, 100%, took me a split second, inquisitiveness, because it also shows me all these other traits are kind of underneath it that I look for in, certainly in my team of teams. Tom?
I've had, first of all, I agree 100% with that. What it made me think about is when I was a first line sales manager, I had guys say to me, I made, 5 calls a day, 6 calls a day, 7 calls a day. And so I went with them, and they'd have like 45 minutes with someone where they talked about who they were, what their product was. And then, got another call. I said to the guy, what do we know about him and his problems, or her and her problems? Oh, we'll do that in the next meeting. That's the complete, and by the way, that's so typical of a lot of poor salesmen, is all they want to do is talk about their product. If I'm going to meet Guy, I should use that 20 minutes to find out what Guy's biggest issues are. First of all, I've done some research with people under Guy, and I believe he said I need to grow the company. He has 3 main things, and if I was there, I would say, if I understand correctly, these are the 3 things you're trying to accomplish, your group and as a company, and I have some thoughts on how we can help you in those areas. Would that be a good thing to spend our time on? I guarantee you'd say yes. And then I would try and direct it to directly and listen when he came back and said, well, I don't see it that way. Great, now I'm learning. And when I leave in 20 minutes, guys knows I've done the research, that I've thought about the problem, whether or not I got exactly the right answer. And this doesn't have to be me going for a job, it's just me connecting. And we want to see each other again. You'd like to pursue that conversation more. The worst mistakes people can make is try to take that 20 minutes and get a one-punch knockout, right? I am going to impress this person so much by all my talk. And the last thing I would say is be on time. And if you say you want 20 minutes, don't take 21. Just be on time. Don't use it to stay. Make an impression. Learn about the person. If you walk out of there knowing 5 key things you didn't know, your next conversation, that person's going to go at another level.
Hey, Natalie, just to pick up, this will be 30 seconds, just to pick up on the last thing that Tom said. It is true, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There's no such thing as a dumb first question. There is such a thing as a dumb second question. So, and all I wanted to emphasize here is, if somebody comes in and asks 5 straight questions, and they didn't even listen to what you said, those are 4 dumb questions and 1 good one. I think the first question is always a wide open opportunity. The second one should be relevant. You have to listen. If you don't listen, you don't get to the 3rd question, or you don't get to the 4th question. So no dumb first questions. There are many dumb second questions. I can't tell you how many times I've been turned off by the 2nd question. But I've never been turned off.
I call it active listening, Guy, right? You're not listening so that when they get done talking, you can talk again. You're listening, and your reaction to what and you'll learn right away what interests them, and go and then have that conversation. Then they go, the person gets it.
Yeah, really important for the student body. Really important for them to know that.
Well, thanks, Guy. Thanks again, Tom. We've certainly learned many more than 5 things we didn't know before. On behalf of all of us, I know Dean Kremers is eager to express our gratitude. Martin, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Natalie. Well, thank you, Guy, and thank you, Tom. That was terrific. Thank you for all the ways you are giving back today by sharing with us your insightful and inspiring conversation. Guy, we're so honored by your participation in this event today, and we're so very grateful for giving everyone watching the opportunity of learning from you. Tom, thank you for bringing Guy to our students in the college. It was a terrific event. I would also like to thank everyone who helped out with this episode of Tom Mendoza Presents, especially Jean, Natalie, Carol, and Beth, the technicians at ND Studios, and our partners at the Alumni Association of Notre Dame. Finally, thank you everyone for watching. We will be back with Tom Mendoza Presents in the fall semester, so please be on the lookout for our announcement about that. Have a great weekend, everyone, and go Irish.
Go Irish. Thank you. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Bye.